7.2b is about factoring trinomials using the box method. Trinomial, remember, is an expression with 3 terms. So factoring is just reverse multiplication. So when we were talking about multiplication, we talked about this box method where you know what's on the outside of your box, right? So you have polynomials such as x plus 6 times x minus 5, and you use what's on the outside of the box to figure out what's inside, right? To multiply them together. So when we're factoring, we're going to do the opposite. We're actually going to start off knowing what goes inside our box, okay? And we're going to use that information to figure out what should be on the outside of our box. Steps of factoring. Remember, yesterday we talked about the greatest common factor. You always want to look for a greatest common factor first, and then we're going to use our box method after. We're going to be factoring quadratic trinomials, so they'll be in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So we're going to be using something called an AC method along with our box method, where we're going to figure out what a times c is, and we want to figure out 2 numbers that multiply to be a times c and add to be our b variable. So multiply to be a times c, add to be our b variable. When you're doing your box method, we're always going to start off by filling in these 2, the upper left-hand corner box and the bottom right-hand corner. X squared, okay, your very first term, your ax squared term, goes in that top left-hand box, and your constant, okay, so our constant c goes in that bottom right-hand box. Every single time, that's how you should start, all right? So what we need to figure out, we need to find 2 terms, right? In these boxes, we need to find the 2 terms that would add together to be negative 4x. So this is where our puzzle comes in. Puzzle's going to help us out. Well, we're going to take a times c. Well, that in this case would be 1 times negative 21, which is just negative 21. And then our b variable is negative 4. So we want to find 2 numbers that multiply to be negative 21 and add to be negative 4x. Okay, well, let's just look at some factors of negative 21. 1 and 21, let's see, 3 goes into it, 3 and 7, those are our factors. So if we want to negative a number, right, we could have negative 7 and positive 3. Negative 7 times 3 is negative 21. Negative 7x plus 3x is negative 4x. So we have found the 2 numbers that multiply to be negative 21 and add to be negative 4. So these are our 2 missing terms. So negative 7x is going to go in one of our boxes. 3x is going to go on the other. I could have switched those around. It doesn't really matter which one or which square they're at in the box. Now we filled our box out. Okay, so remember we have the inside of our box, so this is going to help us find the outside of our box. We're actually going to think back to our greatest common factor. We're going to find the greatest common factor of each row. So each row, 1, 2 rows, and each column, 1, 2 columns. So if I'm looking at x squared and 3x, well, the only thing that goes into x squared and 3x is x. So I can factor an x out of that top row. Looking at negative 7x and negative 21, I could factor a negative out, and 7 goes into 7 and 21. Well, then x squared and negative 7x, I could factor an x out of there. And looking at 3x and negative 21, I could factor a 3 out. So this leaves us with the factors x minus 7 times x plus 3. So we took x squared minus 4x minus 21 and we factored it into 2 binomials, and that was our job. These types of problems are really cool because you can always, 100% of the time, check your answer. So in theory, if we did this correctly, if we multiply our answer together, then we should end up with the original problem. So I set up our box method down here at the bottom. So let's take x minus 7 and multiply it by x plus 3. Well, x times x is x squared. Okay, notice how that's why we put that first term in that upper left-hand box. Okay. Well, negative 7 times x is negative 7x. 3 times x is 3x. And negative 7 times 3 is negative 21. So notice that's why we put our negative 21 in that bottom right-hand corner. Well, I'm going to take this and write it out. So x squared minus 7x plus 3x minus 21. Remember, we need to combine those two like terms. So we'll end up with x squared minus 4x minus 21. And what do you know? That's the same as our original problem. So that's how we know for sure that we factored our problem correctly. Let's add a couple more. Letter B, so using our box method, this time we have 8x squared plus 2x minus 3. So let's set up our puzzle. You want our A, multiply to be A times C, add to be our B variable. So A times C, in this case, is 8 times negative 3. So we want two numbers that multiply to be negative 24 and add to be positive 2x. So multiply to be negative 24, add to be positive 2x. Remember, if you're ever stuck, start listing your factors of 24. Since it's multiplying to be a negative, one of them is going to have to be negative. 2 and 12. How about we try negative 4 and positive 6? So negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. Negative 4 plus 6 is 2x. So it looks like negative 4x and 6x are our missing terms. So remember, 8x squared, that first term's always going to go in that upper left-hand box. Your constant's always going to go in that lower right-hand box 100% of the time. And all we needed to find was these two leftover boxes. Now that we've done this, we are ready to find our greatest common factors. Well, looking at 8x squared and 6x, 2 goes into 8 and 6, and we could take an x out since there's an x in both of those. Looking at negative 4x and negative 3, well, we can factor a negative out. Nothing goes into 4 and 3 other than 1. So I'm going to take a 1 out of there, and it looks like we can't take an x out, so we're done there. 8x squared and negative 4x, well, we could take a 4 out, and we could take an x out. And then 6x and negative 3, well, we can't take an x out, but we could take a 3 out. 3 goes into 6 and negative 3. So our factors are 2x minus 1 times 4x plus 3. Now would be a good time to pause and multiply those together to double check your answer. Let's look at one more example. We've got 4x squared minus 9. So for this one, we don't have a middle term. So that middle term is actually like we're adding 0 or 0x. When we set up our puzzle, our A times C will be 4 times negative 9, which is negative 36. We want two numbers that multiply to be negative 36 and add to be 0. Okay. Well, in order to add to be 0, they have to cancel out, right? So it's got to be opposites, a positive and then the negative number. Well, the square root of 36 is 6. So if we take 6 and negative 6, we'll multiply and we get negative 36. 6 minus 6 is 0. So those are our two numbers that we're looking for. So we can put 4x squared and negative 9 in our box right off the bat. And then we found 6x and negative 6x as our missing boxes. Now it's a good time to pause and try to find your greatest common factors. We'd get 2 and x. Here we get 3. 4x squared and 6x, we can take out a 2 and an x. And then looking at negative 6x and negative 9, a 3 can come out. And then since our negative's right there, I'm going to take the negative out also. So our factors are 2x plus 3 times 2x minus 3, and that's our answer. Reminders, factoring, remember, it's just reverse multiplication. Always look for that greatest common factor. None of these problems had greatest common factors. And we're going to be focusing on using that box method.